fantastic first panel discussion on water. And whenever the survival of human beings is kind of discussed, we say there are three primordial necessities: food, shelter, clothing. So we discussed food and water in the first round. But the next three important are always the health, protection, and education. In Marathi, we call it Arogya, Shikshan, Samrakshan. All three are equally primordial for human survival. So after discussing water, which is extremely necessary, this panel will discuss education as a lever for rural development. We have great educationist and the CEO of Deshpande Foundation who has experience in different continents in higher education, and we would like to listen from them that how can we actually bridge the gap, various gaps from north or south, from India and the US, and create a bridge so that we can understand the models of collaboration to use education as a lever for rural development. And many of them, they are visiting Hubli. One of them is visiting for the first time. So let me begin this entire conversation on that light note. Subraji, you visited Hubli for the first time and attended our immersion. What was the experience? Is this the India that you had already known, or has it changed? And how did you compare your journey and what the reality was on the ground? Your first impression after your visit to the immersion.
Thank you, and it's also a great pleasure to be here. So I left India to go to the US for studies in 1977. So of course India has changed quite dramatically since that time. But going to visit some of the schools yesterday in Hubli, they were not that different from the schools that I went to when I was a middle school student or a elementary school student in South India. So there is a tremendous opportunity at this time. And I just want to take a minute or so to focus on some of the opportunities and challenges. One of the things that COVID taught us just in the last 4 years is technology can fill the gap, at least temporarily, for a lot of things that otherwise would not be possible to achieve. But at the same time, it also showed us that it, in its entirety, is not the solution to many of the human problems. And education is right at the core of this. And I just want to, I'm involved with a nonprofit which is based in Switzerland called Global Learning Council. In fact, several people in this audience, including RCM Reddy, Desh was there last summer, that focuses on use of technology for the benefit of society, and especially in the context of learning. The problem is the following. While technology enables, mainly through online access, opportunities for education to billions of people, at the beginning of COVID, when we were all forced to go online for education and for everything else, half of the world population of 8 billion could not get online. So that is a huge challenge, the inequality in access to education through technology. The second issue is that post-COVID, there's been a serious decline in both developed and developing countries in the quality of education because children suffered during COVID, and that has exacerbated inequality. And the third point I want to make, especially in the context of education, is that the inequality that existed in education and employment or access to the internet, etc., disproportionately widened for the underrepresented groups in most of the countries, I assume, including in India. So those are three challenges just sort of to frame and how do we address this. And I just want to finish with one comment, because at the opening we heard about Chandrayaan, which is one of India's greatest achievements. As Desh mentioned, $80 million spent to go to the south side of the moon. which is a remarkable achievement with a level of precision that's unprecedented, technology and sophistication. And it's a moonshot project. When I was at the National Science Foundation, we gave out something to the tune of about $7 billion a year for research, basic research across the US. And people used to ask, why are you wasting money on small things? Why not give for moonshot projects? It's very important, and often in the US we quote John F. Kennedy, who said before the decade is over, we'll go to the moon and bring the person who lands on it safely back home. It was achieved. The point I want to make is that somebody made a comment. We put Neil Armstrong on the moon before we put wheels on the suitcase. So the first patent filed to put wheels on a suitcase was in 1970 in Massachusetts. So wheels have been around, suitcases have been around, but nobody thought of putting them together. So the point is, in the context of innovation, you have an opportunity to do something very big, like Chandrayaan, but also do something which may not seem as fashionable, like rural Yam, which impacts people in much larger scale on Earth very quickly. So that's the point. Thank you.
Oh, super. Thank you so much. The Chandrayaan did a soft landing on the south side, but for the social issues that we are dealing, and I would like to ask Paul, is that these are difficult inequities to bridge. Higher education on one side expands the frontiers, and skilling on the other side empowers and enables generations to kind of get into that exploration, because those who got skill went to the urban places. Their children got an opportunity for a much better opportunity for higher education in India. You come with your experience of two main countries, Australia as well as Canada. Wanted to understand, A, the potential of this higher education to solve these kinds of challenges, where it lies, whether it can do it, and how do you see the possibilities to bridge these inequities that we have today?
Thank you for that question, and great to be here. And it's always inspiring to come back to Hubli every year. I think it's my third time, and the chance to see the passion. And I don't recall my teachers being able to dance like that when I was a student. So that was always inspiring. But thank you for your question. I'm an educationalist, and I've worked in higher education for a number of years. I've spent 10 years in America, a long time in Canada, and a long time in Australia. And I firmly believe that in the power of education to transform. And I've seen it, and I've experienced it, and I've facilitated it. And I've had a chance to see different models. But I recognize from a university's perspective, universities can only do so much. And I think there's a general question around accessibility to university and how governments and policies and institutions can provide frameworks and incentives and ways to enable better access. And I've seen some models in Australia that I think are really models for the world, and it relates to bridging the gap between rich and poor around university access. And they have a program there called HEX, Higher Education Compensation Scheme, which enables anyone to attend university subject to their ability to be accepted in the university, but no upfront fees. Fees are only to be paid after you finish your university, after you've gotten a job and you're making at least $52,000. So what it does is says educational access is not going to be a financial means is not a barrier to access. And I think those kinds of ways of thinking we need to do more of that. Canada has traditional student loans, and we see that in the States as well. People graduate with hundreds of thousands of dollars of student debt. There might be a music teacher, there might be a physicist, but they have lots of debt. So we have to think about how do we confront that. But I also think we need to step back and say, well, universities can do so much. It's about how do people get to universities or to colleges and to access skills. So the K-12 system really is something we have to focus on, not just access, but it's what's happening in the classroom. How do we keep young people inspired? How do we keep them connected? How do we deal with things around technology in a positive sense? So a lot of young people have telephones. Telephones aren't great when you're in the classroom, right? They're a huge distraction. In the latest PISA survey results that I looked at, they were showing that 30% of students who participate in that global survey, 15-year-olds, are distracted with mobile phones. So it is impacting some of their learning. So long story short, education transforms. We need to make sure there's accessibility models, and that to me is the way to bridge some of the gap between rich and poor to access both trade schools, community colleges, and universities.
Fantastic. I think I'll come back to that for the models that we need to explore for collaboration. But prior to that, Anand, we were discussing, and you were extremely passionate about these two things. One is the higher education is becoming extremely expensive. It is not easy to access that. And these, what Paul mentioned, those kinds of initiatives are not present in India. So how to make sure that the quality higher education access improves, and can technology, because you come from that domain, play any role in improving that access?
Thanks, Nanda. I think the standard trope for the value of education, like the central conceit of education, is that education is a great leveler. That it is education that enables social mobility, it's education that addresses inequality. But what we actually see in the world is education, to a large extent, is actually driving inequality, driving inequity, because of the cost of education and access. Now in India, we seem to have somehow solved the problem of access to a large extent. When I was growing up in India, it was very common to see children in villages not going to school. It's very rare to see that now. So there is access to schools. There is reasonable penetration of technology. There is access to higher education to an extent that was inconceivable again when I was a student. There is in fact probably an excess of university college seats in India, even in disciplines like engineering, which are very high demand. So the problem of access, I think, is maybe, it seems to me, a little bit blunted in India, but what has been really exacerbated is the problem of quality. So access is there, quality is not there. And in a very real sense, in countries like India, which always had sort of social inequities, a lot of like class and caste-based inequities, I think that society is now moving towards a situation where the real binary is between people who have access to quality education and those who don't, and the consequences of not having access to quality education are very dire. So we see large gaps in income between those who are fortunate and those who are not, and to some extent, it's almost like a lottery. If you're in urban India, you have a higher chance of quality education. In rural India, you have access, but not quality. So it's not clear to me how you. I mean, this is a central conundrum in society today. How do you kind of enable access with quality? So I think technology, the role of technology is what you asked. I think technology, the way I see it, is it enables access, and it enables access to content. Primarily, most of what you see today in the deployment of technology in education is in enabling access to content. But the problem with education is content is just part of the problem. Unfortunately, I think education involves effort on the part of individuals. It involves having the right ambience, the right sort of environment where you can actually engage the content that you may have access to. That's another big challenge in India, just having that kind of environment. I mean, I think one of the things when I've been here at the Deshpande Foundation for 7 months, been very involved with skilling, and one of the things I start appreciating is not so much the content that an organization like Deshpande Foundation is able to enable access to, But the environment that we are able to create in terms of classrooms, campuses, just the sheer enablement of aggregating youth so that there is an actual learning environment. One of the other big problems in India is that we don't have, even though we have schools, we don't have learning environments. And I'm talking about real physical environments, spaces, peer-to-peer learning possibilities, and all of that. A lot of that is there in the developed world. So these are the challenges that I see, and that we need to kind of recognize and try to find solutions for. And this problem of, just as a final note, the problem of I think the problem of inequity in education is not specific to a developing country like India. It's also very much there in the US. And the US itself is a hyper-developed country where I think education is also not necessarily a leveler. It's actually maybe fomenting the increasing inequality you see there. So I see these are the challenges we need to acknowledge and address.
Yeah. No, thank you. This is a great answer. I think enabling conditions along with technology only will make that technology possible. And I was discussing it with Desh, and he brought in a point, and he said, you can ask this to Subra and others to respond, is that technology being an enabler becomes almost like a second step. But the first step is to get communities excited about it, get them involved about it, so that they use technology for the betterment. And in India, that first step that we have, that there is hunger, that we want to do something, but getting excited about the answer and keeping that excitement and passion for the longer time is always a challenge. You've been involved with HP's effort through their foundation and being on their board. You've seen villas and in Switzerland. What can we learn from these institutions and passion? How do we infuse that kind of passion and sustain this enthusiasm to use technology? And we would like to listen that from you.
Thank you. So in the context of how to scale up opportunities for education, I'm rephrasing your question more broadly. Please. In fact, I want to go back to your comment, Anand's comment about the US model. Currently there are lots of challenges in the US educational system, especially K through 12 system, even though universities are globally well recognized, even though universities are finding themselves increasingly more under fire. One of the really remarkable things about the US educational system is at the height of the Civil War in 1862, when Abraham Lincoln was the president, the country was just falling apart. He did one thing that completely transformed the higher education system in the country, and that is the Morrill Land Grant Act. Essentially, the government gave land to states to create universities. And in fact, places like Iowa State University, Michigan State University, they were some of the earliest to start. And that transfer, and primarily there were two areas. In the case of Iowa State, it was engineering and agriculture. That was the focus of this. So there are many states, especially in the Midwest, but also across. MIT is a land grant university. Cornell is a land grant university as a private university. The whole University of California system. That's a remarkable achievement, a remarkable vision in the middle of Civil War. And what that did was gave access to a large number of Americans to get a university education at a fairly low price, even though unfortunately the state support is changing very rapidly. And one aspect of that also is the creation of community colleges. So if you cannot afford to go to a university, you go to a 2-year community college, which is essentially free in most places, with a small amount that you pay, and then you can upgrade to a university. If you do well, you can go to a graduate school in a very prestigious institution. So there was a stepping stone for anybody from the society. And I think having an infrastructure of that kind would enable very well. Now, if you take a completely different example of places like Germany or Switzerland, you have vocational training. So you don't have to go to a university, but you are trained in a particular vocation. And you can get a job as a welder, a carpenter, or a mechanic in shop, or many other professions that have specialized skills. So that's quite remarkable. So I want to, with that sort of a broad framing, I want to come back to your point about what some of the companies can do. Take the companies in India. In fact, the work that RCM Reddy is doing through SchoolNet in Delhi, which involves tens of millions of Indian students in K through 12. There is an opportunity to use very simple technology to personalize it to the learner. And if we can combine that with entrepreneurship in the private sector and startups, there is a tremendous opportunity to do this.
Yes. I mean, there's a hope, and there's also a kind of anxiety, because India is right now on that curve of demographic dividend, where we see a lot of opportunity and there's potential, but if it is not converted, that same dividend can become a liability. Maybe, Anand, if you would like to respond to that, how do we actually make use of this opportunity?
I want to pick up before that on Subra's point about content, personalization, and all. So there's a lot of effort going to do these kind of things to build content, personalize it, use AI and ML, and I think we are doing this great output from all that effort coming out. We have MOOCs, and there's all this happening with the MOOC platforms. And so I think the opportunity there is to address the complementing, the complementary challenge. So let's say you get all this content piece in place, and again, I think with technology we should be able to get it. And let's say you are able to deliver that content readily anywhere in the world, which also is we're almost there. I think the challenge then becomes enabling people to engage with that content, because to me the problem in education is that it's tough. You want to learn things, it's not easy. You have to put time, effort, focus, no distractions. You need, if you're in K to 12, you need encouragement. You need a learning environment. For anybody who's done well academically has done well not simply because they had great content. It's because they actually were in environments, family environments, school environments where they were kind of kept focused and and encouraged to put the effort to delay gratification. Delaying gratification is critical to succeeding in education. So I think the opportunity for intervention there is to create those spaces and create those environments which are necessarily high touch. I don't know if technology can address those. So I think it's a complementary thing. I think this whole, I think there's a lot of emphasis being placed on technology in terms of content development, delivery, personalization. That's really good things. It's a necessary thing, but I don't think it's sufficient. And what remains is creating those environments.
Yeah.
Can I just
please.
build on that? I think great comments. And look, I recall the same arguments around the internet and Google in terms of the access to information, and so the challenge for universities and colleges is about differentiating how people access information and the skills. It's about having the problem-solving skills. It's about asking the right question, having the emotional intelligence. So there's more than accessing information is the easy part. How do you make sense of it? How do you synthesize it? How do you critique it? So those are the things. Those are the challenges that we need to make sure that education is providing, so that people graduate from universities or colleges with problem-solving skills and leadership skills to differentiate the good and the bad information. I also want to just mention a couple of things. One is around the quality of education. I absolutely agree with you, but that speaks to the need for a very strong regulatory framework. So how do we make sure there's appropriate regulation for universities, colleges, schools, etc., so there is a quality assurance processes in place? Because absent that, students lose out, communities lose out. And the last thing I would say is technology is not enough. You're absolutely right. If we gave every rural young person access to an iPad, they wouldn't necessarily be able to use it because of what Subra's mentioned around the inequalities with respect to access to electricity and things like that. So it has to be more than just technology. And you were speaking to a culture of education. There's a very famous sociologist you might be aware of, Albert Cohen, who
Yes.
wrote a book in 1955 around delinquent boys, it was called,
Yes.
in America. And it was the very issue that you've touched on, which is to say, in some communities, in some neighborhoods, the culture of education is not reinforced in the household.
Mm.
So kids go to school, but they don't do homework. Their parents aren't saying, shut the TV off, do homework. In other neighborhoods and other families, that is encouraged, and that's part of the disparity that we see.
Yeah, I mean, one of the effort of what we are doing at the Deshpande Foundation is to integrating these rural communities in efficient, say, market processes, linking them better to market, bringing them in market, and see whether the market can actually deliver some solution that community can afford by the end of the day. India in this space is, in a way, has a late mover in this. There are communities in the US, communities in Australia, Canada, they're already in that fold. Are there learnings, that some pitfalls that we can avoid, or some learnings that we can do for our communities who are getting integrated in the market? Can we save ourselves a little bit from that? Or is it all that we are in this flow and it will go on? So I would like you to respond to that, and then maybe I'll ask on that same line.
Thank you. I think it's a great question. You know, to what extent can India, as it continues to develop, leapfrog some of the challenges that we see in other parts of the world? I think India has a lot going for it right now that I think are some of the building blocks. So the value of education in the culture is very high. The work ethic appears very high. The commitment to an innovative mindset, solving problems, very, very high. So I think the issues, the way to leapfrog, I would have thought, is to recognize, and I think Subra mentioned this yesterday, 198 million young Indians between K to 12 is upon us. So how do we ensure that that next generation of young people are going to be able to be innovative, to aspire, to be the problem solvers and the creators that are going to change the world in many ways? I mean, that's 5 times larger than the country of Canada, right? So Canada is 40 million. So I think any learnings from Canada, the States, Australia, might be in the regulatory framework. How do we ensure the quality assurance mechanisms? There's some innovative policies around accessibility to education and dealing with student debt. But the building blocks for excitement, I think, are here.
Yeah, just building on Paul's comment, you know, I was just thinking recently that the solutions to address educational inequality or to tap into educational opportunities in India are going to be very different than some of the successful models that have historically worked elsewhere, including the example that I gave for the US, because we are at a different point in time, different point in history, different demographics around the world, and also different opportunities with technology. So what could be some of those opportunities? Just to dream big in the spirit of Moonshot or Chandrayaan, right? So just take in the last 7 or 8 years, mobile access in India. So a company like Jio, within a span of a few years, has 4G mobile services to as many as few hundred, maybe 300 or 400 million Indians at a relatively small cost across India. So can we envision a future where hundreds of millions of Indian children have access to, in rural villages, have access to mobile technology? And it's not, that alone will not solve the problem. Coupled with many of the things, in-person things, that local communities do, like what we saw yesterday with the Deshpande Foundation, can that provide curated content in the hands of hundreds of millions of children? And maybe even with the technology platforms that entities like Deshpande Foundation and government organizations do, personalize it to the learner in new and unique ways. For example, yesterday we saw a school where students from 1st standard to 3rd standard, they're all in the same classroom. So So is that, if that can be done, that will be a paradigm shift in education. And I think with the cost of, so the question is, I think it is an achievable goal. The technology exists, but it's a question of motivating. And then to go back to your earlier question about motivating the students to learn, can such platforms be tailored so that when they go to the platform, it's not to play games or to send a Facebook post, but rather the curiosity of the child focuses immediately on the content. So,
just the other day, with Jayashree's initiative, our rural schools held a spelling bee competition, and they were understanding the words from their environment and then spelling those words. But what I found most interesting, that the kids came on the stage to discuss their spelling bee experience. It is completely different than what happens in the US, because these are the words they are actually using in their environment, and they were reading about them and then they were studying. But two of them came to the stage and said, I used Google to find more words and meanings, and I also used ChatGPT to find more words and meanings. So the technology is now penetrating even in our rural schools, where they know what to kind of search for when they are speaking about it. So there is a kind of excitement. This excitement needs a little bit of shaping up and inspiring even the teachers, and the role of partners who come on board. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the last comments from three of you and then open it and give more time for questions, because this is a dialogue. Instead of talking, we would like more questions to come from you. So for this session, we will have, instead of 3, say 5 questions we can take from the audience to our esteemed panel. So I'll just take a brief kind of last comment from you. We looked at the technology as a potential, using education as a lever, also the environment and ambience. The last focus is on building partnerships, not only within India, but across the borders, across the foundations. What are your thoughts, and what are the models that pre-exist?
Yeah, I think the potential for partnership is tremendous. So let's specifically, let me focus on partnerships between non-profits like DD2024 Foundation and education, content developers like universities. So I think my view is that the value and that the non-profit can bring with its broad geographical reach, its boots on the ground often in villages, is to focus on creating those learning environments and creating the learning infrastructure, and not spend too much on curation and technology, because that's being done by, and that's where the partnership would come in. I think, as Subra said, curating is critical. And content is not actually a problem, it's really a surfeit of content, it's curating, and I think that's, I 100% agree with what I think that's a very important point Subra makes. There's a lot of stuff, what do you engage with? So, investing in curating, investing in creating learning environments and spaces is something that that organizations like us, like DD2024 Foundation and other non-profits working on the ground can do very effectively, and then partner with universities, with all the private content deliverers like the MOOCs, like the Coursera's and the Udacities of the world. Create those partnerships, then I think we have a potential for doing something very, very effective and very impactful.
I'm glad you raised partnerships, because that's a big part of our priority at the University of Brunswick. We believe in people, passion, purpose, and partnerships, amongst other things. And if I take our relationship to this great country of India, we've been coming here for several years. I've been coming here since I became president 4.5 years ago. We have 19 partnerships with Indian institutions. Many of those are pathway partnerships. Some are 2+2s. summer student exchanges and faculty exchanges. And we do that because we believe that we're stronger together, and we want to increase opportunities, we want to learn from each other, because there are lots of big, audacious challenges in the world, climate change, health, inequality, energy systems, waste management, all these kinds of challenges. How do we learn from each other and confront them together? Drawing together different scholars from different disciplines, giving students opportunities. And I think I agree with my colleagues, or probably have the same view around education. For me, it's not filling buckets, it's lighting a fire. And to the extent to which we can bring partners together, solve problems collectively, light fires for our students and our postdocs, we're going to have a bigger chance to change the world.
Oh, that's wonderful. Education, that metaphor that instead of filling the bucket, we have to light the fire. And I hope in collaboration we actually focus on that more and more. So thank you so much for the great answer. And I come to you to ask your thoughts around that.
So in terms of partnerships, I think in addition to what Anand and Paul mentioned, there are a couple of other opportunities. So I'm involved with this small group in the middle of Switzerland. The irony of this is maybe 10 or 12 of the most exclusive and expensive private schools in the world are located within about 10, 20 kilometers of where this council is. So envisioning the future of the world, whether it's climate change, education, inequality, poverty, etc., from that setting is not going to be realistic. So, but the students who are there and the students who are here are going to be the future leaders. So one of the objectives in partnerships should also be to take the people who have a lot of experience and also a lot of resources in addressing this problem historically, bring them in contact with the reality of rural villages in India, small towns in Africa. This is one of the objectives of the Global Learning Council, as a way for people who otherwise would never come into contact with one another, bring them together, but connect them. So as an example, we connected the head of the International Baccalaureate program. They have many schools in India, private schools, headquartered in Geneva, with a school system in Rwanda. They met for the first time. And our goal is also to bring those kinds of connections to India. So that's one partnership. Then just two other partnerships come to mind. When we think about global issues that will affect the next generation and the generation after that, things like climate change, the good thing is the younger generation is much more attuned to the severity of those problems than perhaps their earlier generations, which were the source of the problem, in a way. And I think that bodes well. The second, and that's very much true of India, so that's on an optimistic note. Yet another thing that I think is that the students today are much more technology savvy than perhaps their parents and teachers. So how do we tap into that as we roll out technology as an enabler and a stepping stone for education for large numbers of people in India? So I see the bucket as half full rather than half empty, and India has a unique opportunity to set the pace. And in 20 years, Africa is going to be the most populous continent with most young people. So if we get something right in India, and it could serve well as a model for a different continent, maybe 2-3 decades from now. So.
Yes, amazing. I think we have a great segue to open the, for the audience questions. We will take 5 questions. Please be brief. I request those with the mics to just take those questions. And yes, we'll do 5 very quick questions. And yes, please go ahead.
Good morning. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm Sai Akash. I'm a CA by profession and a teacher by passion. He is graduated from a college. He is educated, but he is not employable. He is not skilled. A person spends couple of time more and couple of amounts more. He spends money and to be employable. How can we bridge that gap?
And around the world is to focus on what's called work integrated learning, experiential education, co-ops, So we actually bring in employment placements as part of the curriculum, and so students often get hired sometimes where they have placements after graduation. Some of these models go on for 2 years. I've seen the work that we do with Siemens. Many of our engineer students have basically working over the summer at Siemens, and then they get hired, and Siemens pays their tuition in the 4th year. So there's 4 or 5 different models that we do, because we believe, regardless of which discipline, the chance to have some educational experiences intersecting with industry, government, business, etc., is critical for the student in getting jobs and having skills. So that's what we do for our transition.
Let's go to a slightly higher altitude and ask, what is the purpose of education? And I personally believe that the purpose of education, if it's really successful at any level, whether you leave school with a high school diploma or a university with a degree, the technology and content are moving so fast. In 4 years, you cannot learn everything you need to learn by age 22, so that for the next 50 years, you're going to be successfully employed. So the purpose of education has to give the basic ability to learn so that you can continue to learn for the rest of your life. So learning to learn is the purpose. So then at a minimum, what is the minimum body of knowledge you are supposed to possess when you get a high school diploma or a university degree? It may be how to operate a lathe, or in the old days, or how to program a computer, or how to design a robot or a drone or something like that today. But it's beyond that. Do you have the basic ability to learn something new, something that's complex, given enough training, in a short, whether you work for a company, work for a non-profit, whatever it may be, basic mathematics, ability to reason, communication skills, thinking probabilistically, because nothing in the world is completely black and white. So in the face of uncertainty, how do you make a decision? And how do you work in a team? Empathy and things like this. I think, how do universities do this? I don't think any university anywhere in the world, including ones for which I was president, have figured it out. But I think that's the opportunity. So if we can do that in our curriculum and in our content, then I think we're going to be successful, especially at large scale.
Oh, amazing. This is a fantastic answer that I'm going to play that capsule later independently, because all these things are so relevant and we really need to strive to do that better. The next
does the medium of like podcast and audio, what role it has in education, right? Yeah. Actually, in India, I think it has an extremely promising role. In fact, I think podcast, because one of the problems in India is the problem of not being in school but getting to school. That's actually a fairly severe problem. So we have students who have to spend a lot of time commuting in the local buses and all of that to get to school. And there's actually a lot of time lost for students just getting to school. And so in a situation like that, obviously podcasts can have a significant impact. So I mean, we have reach now through our cellular networks into a lot of the geographies of this country. If there was investments made in good learning podcasts, I think they would. It's a very tactical question, but I think it's definitely an area I personally thought is worthy of significant investment. And podcasts can be mixed up English with local language, so the absorption can be very easy. So, yeah, I think it's possible. Creating that content obviously it takes effort and investment. It's definitely something we should be doing, especially in India, given that a lot of time our children goes in just getting to school.
Yeah.
I'm Ravi, saying that technology and content is only part of the solution for giving inspiring education, which is the need of the hour. So what are your thoughts on creating a large pool of inspiring educators, the teachers, especially in India where still we have face-to-face teaching? Are there any policy changes? The selection processes, do they need to change? How do we create a large pool of inspiring teachers, which I see lacking in the schools?
Dependence on teachers to inspire people. Otherwise, you'll always be having this issue of having a lot of individuals who are inspiring teachers. I don't think that's an easy problem to solve. I mean, we should not ignore trying to do it. But I think if there are ways by which fewer inspiring teachers can influence larger numbers of kids, that would probably be a better way. So that comes back to my original comment of interventions where you create spaces and somehow find ways, just like we use technology to find ways to create access to content. Can we find ways to build maybe technological or non-technological solutions to scale inspiration? So I think that's what we need to find out, and it's a very important thing we need to solve.
I'm in Chikmagalur. See, content in a small village or a small town is not difficult today. The students get the online content very easily, they are quite savvy. And it's actually the problem of plenty, they don't know what to do, they are confused. I think the physical infrastructure, what Anand was mentioning, creating the right environment for the students, the physical school, the building, the quality of the building, all kinds of things, the infrastructure, the sports activities, various cultural activities, extracurricular activities. These are things that is, I think, maybe lacking in some of the government schools or perhaps the rural schools. Unfortunately, I feel the government has been focusing on creating smaller schools in every village. Instead of that, if you are able to create, say, one good school in a taluk for all the villages in the taluk. Today, I think commuting is not a problem. Even in cities, students commute at least for an hour, 30-40 minutes from house to the school. If you can arrange 15 to 20 kilometers traveling today in a rural area, it's pretty fast. You can travel in 20 minutes, 20 kilometers. So you can arrange a network of commuting in terms of buses or school vans, and have a centralized big school having some few thousand students with all kinds of facilities enabled there, including, as I said, I think the rural students, otherwise they are interacting only with the students of their own villages or adjacent villages, the same level of community. Instead of that, if they go to a taluk level, they get to interact with the next, maybe to relatively elite, and then that interaction happens on a daily basis. That aspiration is also perhaps satisfied, and they get exposure to better things. In terms of quality of teachers also, it's a pathetic thing in a school age, having 10 students, 20 students, 40 students, run a school. It's impossible, in fact, that it's not run well at all. Instead, you have 2,000, 3,000 students, a centralized school from K to 10 or K to 12 for all the students of the taluk, and one single school having all types of modern facilities there with good teachers, good sports, good cultural activities, good extracurricular activities, everything. Is that a good model to follow? Anand?
Specific ideas are the right ideas. I don't think this is maybe the right forum to evaluate, but the very fact that you are proposing ideas to address really critical constraints in education in India is really what we need. So we need more, we need dialogues like this. We need ideas along these lines, because I think, I'm sort of confident about technology getting to a point where there will be content curated and delivered. Where I think the challenges are what you just brought up, and everything from it's commuting is possible, but commuting takes time. Can you use that time? Create environments where all this content, all this technology that's enabling its access can be effectively accessed, can be effectively used. So I don't feel competent to comment on the merits of your ideas. I just feel heartened that you're coming up with those kind of ideas, and we need to have forums where those ideas are brought up and debated and discussed, and somehow good ideas like this tried out. And these ideas can only be, most things like this, you have to try a lot. Some things work, some things don't work, so we'll have to do stuff like that. But the important thing is, I feel, not to be excessively focused on technology, which is a little bit of an issue that I see in India. The government's putting a lot of money, putting digital boards in every classroom in the village. I see these digital boards, access, but it's not creating necessarily the complementary learning environment. So I do think we need a lot of ideation, like what you just did.
Thank you.
So, just, I think some very good questions. Three very brief points I want to make in relation to the last 2 or 3 questions. We, not just in India, but all over the world, we put undue burden on the teachers. So previously, education used to be a 3-legged stool. You have government, whether it's local or federal government, and that's one leg of the stool. You have the teachers, other leg of the stool, then you have parents, as the third, our community as the third leg of the stool. Now we can probably have a 4th leg of the stool, which is technology. But each leg by itself is not going to be the answer. And ultimately, with respect to teachers, I think we need to train the teachers in the latest in technology. We need to respect the teachers, and we need to pay the teachers very well. Unless we do all of those, I don't think we can put the burden on the teachers, because they are over in any country. It's especially true in the US, and I suspect it's equally true in India, given the large numbers of student volumes. So that's the first point I want to make. The second point, to go back to your earlier question, and also the other question of how to motivate students. I think they need role models. So you can come from a rural village, but you can be the CEO of a major company, or you could be the prime minister of the country, whatever it is. There is the opportunity, and this school, this education will provide you that opportunity. Rather than talking in hypotheticals, I just want to give one small example. This is at the undergraduate university level, but it applies to high school as well. When I was at Carnegie Mellon University as president in 2014-15, computer science is one of the top programs in the university. If you looked all across the US in around 2014-2015, 72% of all the top students in high schools, in all the high schools in the US, public schools, private schools, valedictorians, were girls. 72% were girls. If you look at the undergraduate freshman class, and it's higher now, by the way, since in the last 10 years. If you look at the undergraduate freshman class in computer science, which was the most sought after field, especially at our university, it was 18% women. And the US national average was 18%. So we decided we're going to change it. But we're not going to change the quality of admission. It's the same. But how do you attract more young girls and women to apply to computer science? So we had a scheme, and this is the role model scheme. So they would apply, they would be admitted on their own merits, no intervention at that point. Once they are admitted, usually we'll just send a letter. They either accept or reject, and that was it. So we decided we'll change this. So we asked all the women professors in computer science who were successful to call these girls once they got the admission. You have admission from all the top schools. You come to our university. I've been a computer science professor, a woman professor, and I've been very successful. You have the opportunity to do the same. If that doesn't work, then the dean picks up the phone and makes a call. If that doesn't work out, as president, I would pick up the phone and call. So that year, we ended up with 48% of the undergraduate class as women. So this is not digital. This is real hard work. But, so Washington Post in November of 2016 carried a story on this. The second part, and the last comment I want to make with respect to digital, watching the Taj Mahal on a computer screen is not the same as visiting Taj Mahal. So computers can take, even in 3D and Vision Pro and all the new Apple gadgets and so forth can work, but it's never the same. So with respect to education, I think the physical intervention is necessary.
With that, is the last.
And for the children in our villages, how do we build these life skills for them at scale? How do we help them build these life skills?
Education, ability to think rationally, quantitatively, to reason, and ability to continue to learn. I think these are common skills. And if this kind of the kinds of programs that the Deshpande Foundation has created, if they can be magnified and expanded with greater public-private partnerships all across the country, and I think that's a step in the right direction.
I think it's a great question, and there's 2 answers I would say. One, in terms of educational design, program design, there are ways to build into content and strategies into a program that tap into some of those issues, experiential issues, learning in the field, teamwork, etc. But there's more than that. Whether it's a university or a college, it's what also happens outside of the classroom. And so we strongly encourage our students to get involved in clubs, whether it's sports or other kind of society clubs. So basically, get involved, learn outside the classroom, extend yourself, do things that you never would have done before, legal things, but having fun and learning and building your friendships and partnerships, those are the skills that can also be successful in the workplace in the future.
Yeah, thank you. With that, I think we close our conversation for this panel here. I thank the panel for great insights. And let's carry this conversation over coffee outside. Thank you so much. Thanks the audience for patience.